Hello, everybody. This is episode 57 of And Now for Something Completely Machinima podcast. We do every Thursday, we put out a new podcast that focuses on Machinima, which is films made inside of real-time game engines. We're in our 50s now. This is episode 57. And we're going to be focusing on Machinima news, which is news about films, about filmmakers, about technology, game-related technology, and all of that. I'd like to introduce my two co-hosts, Damien Valentine. Hi, Damien.
Hi, Ricky.
Hello there. Damien is an established filmmaker with a great series that he's been working on YouTube. And we also have Tracy Harwood. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. She's a scholar and historian of Machinima and related technologies. We're glad to have you here. Phil Rice is usually joining us, but he's gone off to join the Foreign Legion, I think. In any event, he'll be back with us when we do our films section, which is films that we collect. You can contact us through talk at completelymachinima.com. We welcome your comments. We welcome your ideas. And with that, I'll go to the news that I have today. Okay, so starting off, I'd like to talk a little bit about Nvidia's Omniverse creation. We've been talking about that for the last several months. And this last several weeks, there have been two interesting developments. One is that Nvidia has released a new app called Omniverse Code, and it allows developers to write their own code in Omniverse. You can build your own tools. The app includes the Omniverse Kit SDK, templates, and documentation. It looks to be very promising. It's not really a mod. It's more of a tool for people to build applications to take their application, for example, say Silo, the 3D application. It allows the developers of Silo to take the NVIDIA SDK and convert it to an app so that you can use Silo inside of NVIDIA Omniverse. So it's a way for developers of applications and things like that to bring their product into Omniverse. And the second is a really interesting series that NVIDIA has created called Meet the Creators, or the Omniverse creators. And or I think they call them Omnivores. And this article is From Imagination to Animation, How an Omniverse Creator Makes Films Virtually. Now they say virtually because that's the term they choose to use, but it's how a filmmaker makes machinima, basically. And they're focusing on a filmmaker named Jay Solina. He has a YouTube channel called JS Filmz, spelled with a Z at the end. And he uses his channel to showcase his machinima, and he talks about his workflow for how to use Omniverse to create machinima and his films. It's a very informative and somewhat short documentary, and I liked it a lot. And if you're interested in Omniverse, it's a good way to start learning about it. The second little piece that I have in my news is a couple little pieces. One is that I read that a 16-year-old Russian game player was sentenced to 5 years in prison for blowing up the KGB's virtual building in Minecraft. And I have a very capitalized WTF question mark. What the hell? I mean, you blow up something in a virtual world. I could see maybe at most somebody might come and talk to you and say, what are you doing, kid? But sentence him to 5 years? Jesus Christ, I'm so glad I live in America. So if you're in Russia, be careful about what you do in Minecraft or any other games. the next thing I have is I came across an interesting application that's machinima related called Backlot. I saw it on a Facebook page. It was mentioned as being something like Movie Storm. So I thought I'd give it a try, thinking that I could go over, download the demo, check it out, and come up with a report for you guys. So I went to the website, and it's a very professional website. And they have a 7-day free trial, which I thought was pretty skimpy on their part. A 30-day trial is the best thing, even a 14-day trial, but 7 days? And then I figured out why they have a 7-day trial. Because when you sign up for the trial, you have to provide your credit card and you have to cancel within 7 days, or they charge you their standard monthly fee of $30. That's why they have a 7-day free trial, because a lot of people will forget, they'll get charged $30, and too bad. That's not a friendly way to encourage people to use your program. There's no reason to ask for a credit card that makes their website suspicious. Pass on Backlot Filmmaker. Despite it looking good, don't join it.
You have to
And
be
my
intrigued by it up until that
yeah,
point where you said about putting the credit card. I think, yeah, I'm staying away from that.
yeah, get out of here. For a demo, you shouldn't have to provide your credit card.
Not at all.
It's a fair exchange to offer your email address, but credit card and then have it cancel within 7 days, you get charged automatically. Yeah, and you can't opt out of that agreement. That's what the agreement. So screw you, Backlot. And the last piece I have is the best games for the M1 Mac. I bought an M1 Mac back in November, and I'm really, really happy with it. You have to remember the M1 is Apple's combination graphics card and CPU. It's extremely powerful, and I've often thought that since Mac has been lagging behind in game playing, hence not a lot of machinima done on Mac, maybe post-production, but actual production not so much on Macs. I thought with this new improved GPU, they'd be able to do more machinima on it. So I thought about some of the games on Mac, and I came across a really interesting article. It's a video on YouTube created by Tyler Stalman. He is a really interesting guy, and he's really good speaker. His presentations are excellent. I subscribe to him immediately. And he went through some games that are really interesting to him on M1. And they include Firewatch, Pathless, and of course Inside. Not a lot of the contemporary games are on there because I checked some other places and you can do a couple GTAs and things like that, but the graphics component in the Apple is still not quite up to speed for the AAA games like that. But the smaller ones you can do it, like Firewatch and Inside. Also, another downside to M1 gaming is that the fan kicks in pretty quickly playing a game. And the noise is pretty big. Now, of course, you can play with headphones and record with headphones. It's no big deal, but that is something to be concerned about, overheating. Since the MacBook Pro is not a game-based creation, I don't think there have been too many studies about the overheating with games. But in any event, I think it's worth a try. I'm going to try some of it during the course of the year, and I'll share with my my results there. That's my news for today. So let's go on over to Damien and see what sort of news Damien has. Damien?
All right, thank you, Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
So, first thing I found was it's a video by a YouTube creator that I discovered about a year ago. She's a singer and she produces lots of music videos. She's very talented. So a few days ago, she released a video talking about her home studio setup. And I watched it and it was very interesting. And I thought this is actually, even though she's talking about producing music, what she's talking about is her sound setup. And she lives in New York, which is obviously a very noisy city. And she talks about how she blocks out that noise, doesn't disturb the neighbors, the equipment that she uses to record the sound. I thought, well, anyone who's getting into machinima, this is going to be helpful to them because it's the same sound is obviously a very important part of Machinima. So what she talks about is very useful for voice recording. If you're a Machinima creator who also composes and produces your own soundtracks for your films, again, it's worth having a listen to, having a watch of her video. She talks about various microphones and how she got started and what she uses now, and all this other technical equipment, which I'm sure Ricky would be better able to explain than I can. So I just thought, oh, this is helpful to anyone. She talks about video as well, and like green screens and that kind of stuff she uses for music videos. So if you're listening to us now and you're thinking about streaming, that's also a good thing to have in mind for streaming as well. So I thought, well, this is a very helpful guide, and I thought I'll share it with our listeners, and hope you find it really helpful.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. And the other bits of news I've got today is the Nvidia are doing a conference on AI. It's going to be towards the end of March. It's on the 21st to 24th. And they're talking about how AI is being used in their various products like Omniverse. Now, obviously, I don't know what the content of the presentation is going to be yet, but as we've been following Omniverse quite rigorously for the last year or so, since we discovered it existed, I think it'd be worth checking out the conference and seeing what it is about. And I'm guessing they're going to talk a bit about how. So last month I talked about how they're using Omniverse to train self-driving cars. So I imagine that's going to get some coverage, which it doesn't really relate to Machinima, but I'm still quite intrigued by how this 3D rendering platform is used to do that, just out of curiosity. But I imagine they'll be talking about other AI related tools for Omniverse and Canvas, or the other, that 2D painting thing that they've been playing around with. So I think that's worth checking out, and you'll find the links to that in the show notes below.
Right. It's a free conference.
Yes.
I've gone to it many times, and it's well worth your time.
Well, that's my news for the week.
Thank you, Damien. Now let's move on to Tracy. Tracy always has great news. The best. She always has the best news. So let's see what you come up with this week.
Such a smoothie, Ricky. Such a smoothie.
It's true. It's true.
I don't know if you heard the bleep, bleep, bleep on my phone, but that's Phil texting us from his football game. So saying, have a nice evening, he's saying. Okay, so I've got three smallish pieces of news, but probably with fairly big consequences. And the first one I wanted to talk to you about is, in recent weeks, we've seen a number of game publishers converge into the ownership of just a few organizations. And the latest announcement is that of Microsoft. And that's Phil again. Are you getting our messages, he's saying now? The latest announcement is that of Microsoft, which is planning to buy Activision Blizzard, which includes games such as Call of Duty, Warcraft, and Overwatch.
Right.
And this follows its purchase last year of Bethesda. Now, their rationale, of course, is that these are the building blocks for their version of the metaverse. And, the old adage, there can be no metaverse without content. What I think is interesting here is their strategy really is to get those games onto their Netflix-like subscriber service. And what has surprised folks with their last purchase was that games such as Fallout and Skyrim would still be available on platforms other than those owned by Microsoft. But that has actually proven not to be the case. So the question now is therefore, with these additional games expected, are these additional games expected to go the same way? And what tools will they be making available for indie content creators to continue to work with once they tie down these titles to their Xbox and PC Game Passes? Now, I guess we're going to have to wait and see, but it feels like creators are really the last folks on their minds at this juncture.
Yeah, exactly what I thought.
And yet, they're the very ones that help these developers push the story worlds into new directions. So I'm quite concerned about this. I'm guessing Ricky and Phil and Damien will be equally as concerned when we see how this unfolds. I think it's definitely one to watch.
Yeah.
So that's my first piece, slightly different take on how these games are converging.
Right.
The second piece of news is in terms of Second Life. Now, we're all now seeing, many comparisons in news stories and video reports between, current attempts by numerous others, I have to say, to build their versions of the metaverse. And draw lessons from Linden Labs' experience over the last, 19 years since Second Life began?
18.
18 years, is it? Okay. So of all of the things published recently, I think you can probably do no worse than listen to Philip Rosedale and Wagner James Au on a recent podcast that they've released about transforming the future of Second Life and making a more humane metaverse. In their January episode, they talk about some fascinating considerations for creating virtual worlds that can be navigated as a single space. Most of these are not single spaces. Most of these are worlds that are being created and not being thought about necessarily in that way. They also talk about just how much detail is needed to make a world feel real, how you might deal with griefers and monetizing engagements, what the development of currency, what direction that takes you in, and the role of the virtual aesthetic. I think probably the only aspect they don't really touch upon is the role of machinima in documenting what goes on, which of course, is a massive part of the content that we see these days. Not just from Second Life, of course, but from every other virtual open world. It's huge. And not a lot of folks are talking about that. Now, we'll put a link into the podcast in our show notes to that particular episode. And I suggest you have a listen to it. It's quite compelling, of course, because Philip was the founder of Second Life, and Wagner James Au, of course, worked for Linden Labs in those early days. Ever since which he's hosted a blog, really interesting blog actually, called New World Notes.
Yeah.
And in 2008, he also published the book, The Making of Second Life. It's a great book, yeah. I dare say a few of the current incumbents into this metaverse environment might do well to actually invest in some of those early resources. Yeah. And I'm not sure they are doing. So that's my comment.
Be sure to listen to that. That sounds like a fascinating podcast.
It's a really interesting podcast. Definitely recommend that. And then finally, my final bit of news today is TMUnderground, which, all of us will know was a site that was home to many of the machinima community since 2008, has now finally gone offline. And this, of course, follows the passing of its founder, Ken White, which we reported on in our August 21 news episode. And what's nice here is that Edan Mackenzie has written a really wonderful commemorative piece of music, which he's published on SoundCloud. So this is not a piece of machinima news as such, but it is a beautiful composition which celebrates the community and all its achievements. The piece is called A Fond Farewell, and it really is beautifully evocative. It's a piece through which Edan describes what TMUnderground meant to him. And actually, I think it probably will resonate with many in the community. So well said, Edan. Yeah. And we'll include a link in the show notes. And that's it for me.
TMU was, I believe, stood for the Movies Underground, and was established when the movies came out back in 98, was it? Tracy?
When the movies was launched.
Right.
I think it was about back end of 2004, actually.
Oh, Jesus, I'm way off. Yeah.
It was definitely in, Peter Molyneux definitely talked about it many years before. So you probably remember that kind of conversation back in the late 90s. But it didn't actually come to fruition until, one of the first films to come out from it was The French Democracy, which was made within a few days of it being launched. And I think that was a 2005 film. So it's 2005 that it was actually launched. And then it ran until 2008, I think, when it was switched off. And you're right, this is where TMUnderground came from.
Yeah. And so it was a repository for the movies initially, but then it became wider, and it appealed to the machinima community in general. I'm really sad to see it go. I understand why it's gone.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, things like this are driven by the passions of an individual or a group of people, and once they have moved on to something else, or someone dies or becomes involved in another job, it all falls away. And I'm sorry to hear that. I understand it. It's inevitable. But I just want to thank all of the people involved with TMU Underground for caring so much about machinima and the machinima community enough to start a depository and a repository for films, and to keep it up for as long as they did. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody
Yeah.
listening?
You can still find bits of it, not all the links to the films, I'm afraid. I did check it out earlier today, in fact. You can still find the site on the Wayback Machine.
That's at archive.org.
Yeah.
Wayback Machine. That's good. Yeah. Well, thank you. I thought we'd segue in the very last bit of our news section as a segue into our films section, which comes next. We're going to be focusing on films made in the virtual metaverse now of Second Life. And I thought it would be interesting to do just a brief discussion of Second Life as a way to get us in the mood and thinking about them. And I was involved in Second Life for some time. We did a Machinima Film Festival there for some time. So I had met a lot of people and worked with technology there. And then for some reason, I moved away from it. I don't know why. It'd be an interesting thing to explore because I think some other people like Tracy and maybe Damien, I know Phil left Second Life there. So it'd be interesting to find out why. But I do want to talk a little bit about what Second Life is, how it has survived for 18 years to come to a point where it's thriving now with the whole promotion of the metaverse. Second Life is poised to reap benefits of all of that attention. But I think the main reason that Second Life has survived and has done so well is money. It has 600 million annual gross domestic product. 2 billion user generated assets have been created to date. It has 200,000 daily active users, and it processes more than 345 million annual transactions. And get this, it pays more than $80.4 million to creators annually. I think that says a lot about why Second Life has stayed alive for so long, because it's a way for people to make a living, a way for people to make money. We like to think of it sort of sentimentally as, oh, well, it's a great place to be free and we can create art and do all this stuff. But there's a lot of money to be made in this. And one thing that you won't hear on a Rosedale Wagner Au podcast is the sex aspects of Second Life. There's a huge wall that separates people from the regular Second Life from the area where sex workers are, and it's big. It's a really big deal, and a lot of money is made that way for virtual sex. Something they don't want to talk about because of the bizarre morality of American interests, middle class interests. But that's the main reason why I think it has survived. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I remember spending a lot of time exploring Second Life, and there's so many places you can go where there's stores set up and people are selling their creations, costumes that you can wear, or props that you can carry around, or buildings you can put on your own lands, even vehicles you can get in and drive around or fly around in. Mm-hmm. I mean, it'd be no surprise that I was quite interested in finding spaceships I could get in and fly around in.
Yeah.
I even had I found an area that was, I don't know if it's still there now, but they're obviously big Doctor Who fans, so they recreated the Cardiff Bay area from the real city which is used a lot for filming. And because I've lived near there, I went and had a look around, and I said, well, I've been to the real place, and what you guys have done is so accurate to the real place. And they were very happy to know that. And you could go in, you could buy all these Doctor Who related things that people have created. So I bought a TARDIS, which you could sit in, and you press the button, it would dematerialize just like the show, and then it could make it randomly take you to other parts of Second Life. So that's a good way to explore in a way that is on theme for something I enjoyed as well.
Yeah.
Second Life also rents land and buildings. I know that when I joined Kali back in 2008, 2009, something like that, I probably spent over $100 in the first month just buying clothing, buildings, getting a house at a certain place, filling the house with furniture that I liked, and buying hair and going shopping and all of that. In fact, that was one of the most fun things. Is I got together with somebody I met on Second Life, and they took me on a shopping trip to all the places that they liked. And you go into these stores that are open 24/7 virtually, and you go in and you look and you just buy. You find something you like and you bang, bang, it's right in your inventory. In fact, by the end of the first year, my inventory was hopelessly snarled with purchases that I just completely disorganized. It was like you had a big room and you threw all your stuff in it.
Exactly.
A lot of these sellers, they give away free stuff as well, so you get a taste of some of their early creations or something they just want to, so you can just go around and collecting all this free stuff, and again your inventory fills up with all these things that you've collected. And then
what do you do with them? That's an interesting thing. I mean, I like you, Ricky, I can't, how did I get into it? Well, I got into it a little bit before you, I think, because we were exploring it at my work as a potential, we bought an island and we were going to use it as a kind of a sandbox environment with students, with a view to doing some, interesting virtual teaching experiences in there. Well, we had a few folks sort of playing around with it, and it kind of quickly died out as a sort of a classroom environment, because of course what we were trying to do in many ways was replicate what we do offline. And during that kind of period, there was a lot of folks going in there and doing stuff which was basically doing the same as you would do in real life, and it wasn't really pushing the boundaries of it, I think. So there were a lot of brands in there. I remember brands like IBM, I think, was in there, and Harley Davidson and whatnot, and they were just virtual assets of their physical assets. And why, I don't know.
Exactly.
So that was that didn't last very long, but what I did used to enjoy is going around. I mean, Chantel Harvey was a real good friend in this space. She'd been in there for years and years. And she showed me around, and we went shopping. She showed me, all the kind of good places to go and get stuff. Well, primarily the reason we were doing that was because we wanted to, do sort of presentations where we were doing the presentation simultaneously in the virtual space. Right. I remember one such space where we were doing it both in the virtual space, and I was in the physical space, and my avatar was doing stuff in the virtual space along with hers and what have you. And so we had to get dressed up and what have you. And what was quite fun about that was not that you weren't just dressing it in clothes. You were changing its shape, or the way it moved, or how it sat down, or if it could dance, and all of those things I thought were really kind of fascinating things that you could add as character features, if you like, to your avatar, which kind of made it more kind of more interesting, really. And this
Yeah.
sort of social aspect of it, the fact that you were doing that with a friend was
Right.
was really, you know, we had such a laugh. In fact, last year when we did a recording in one of Chantel's meetup groups, Machinima Mondays meetup group, which remains the longest standing community group doing machinima type stuff in Second Life.
Right.
You know, we had a bit of a meetup beforehand, and we went through some of the space, and we were having just a real good laugh about, you know, how the avatar's working and you know, some of the things that you can do with it and can't do with it and what have you. So that I thought was really interesting. The other aspect is to do, you know, more recently, I think, to do with using it for virtual events and virtual activities.
Right.
And, you know, if we think about the last couple of years, it's been incredibly difficult to do social stuff in real life. And, you know, I think one of the reasons it's been growing again in the last couple of years is because of what's been going on in real life, and people have wanted to sort of meet folks in social settings again. So, you know, there's some, you know, some great kind of destination things that you can kind of go and do in that.
So timing to some extent is what Second
like
Life
everything else
benefits. Like
everything else, I think, you know, like the growth of Zoom, for example, like the growth of Omniverse, all of it really is, you know, it probably would have been a slow, steady growth towards that, but the fact is that
because of
the pandemic
COVID
has accelerated the adoption of that sort of stuff.
Now, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that's probably why there are a lot of other organizations now interested in the metaverse too.
Yeah, that's true. One thing I think happened that caused Second Life to decline a bit and go out of the sort of zeitgeist was that I believe Second Life preceded Facebook. And I believe Facebook came out just after the height of Second Life's popularity. And I think it provided a better way for people to do social interactions.
That's correct.
Because one of the problems that you have with Second Life is simply the difficulty of access and control. That's why they have a beginners area where you start out in a sort of play box area where you learn how to do controls and stuff. But even so, it was it took me a month or so to become comfortable with how to contact people, how to go from place to place, how to move, how to do messaging to people, how to record, how to get things that you bought onto your avatar.
And I think clunky interface.
It is, and I think that was something that I hope that they'll address in the future, because they haven't done much to address it.
It's still not easy to use, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
and Facebook provided a way that you could just do it like that.
Yeah,
I mean, it was perfect. It was like a blog or a website where you could just drop and drag and move, and I think that was one of the things that pulled people away from Second Life.
I wouldn't have compared those two things or put them together, because, you know, Facebook is more asynchronous and more about the real you, and Second Life was all about creating another persona, a multi-you,
right,
or an extended you.
Well, I was thinking more of the social interactions.
Yeah.
Rather than because the people that wanted to stay in Second Life because they liked the avatar concept and the another you concept, they stayed. You know? And I also think one thing that Facebook didn't have that Second Life has and still has to a great abundance is its appeal to the artistic and freedom-loving people who want to create things.
Yeah.
Whether they're creating art, or whether they're creating architecture or land, or, for example, the people that did the Doctor Who thing.
Yeah.
What a great project. You get a bunch of people who are fans of Doctor Who and they say, we're going to recreate this thing. And it becomes this driving force in their lives so that they share their creativity, and Facebook makes that, once you get past the hump of the interface and how to change things and how to model and all that, and you get good at it, you can create some pretty amazing things, you know. In fact, quite a bit of I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'll try not to do too much. One of the things that you see a lot in Second Life Machinima is documentaries of installations or locations, which I think is fascinating, you know.
It's, you know, that has given Machinima a whole, you know, it's a whole different world of Machinima for something like Second Life, where you're documenting that virtual experience.
Yeah.
There is no other way. You know, Machinima, you have to use Machinima, whether you're, you know, when you're taking a photograph to position whatever it is you're doing, like in a virtual studio, or to create, you know, a fly through of an installation or an experience, or whatever you do. Machinima is the only way to do it. So there is a real, you know, it plays a really important role there.
It does. And so some of the questions we're going to be asking in the Filmz version, which is coming up, is every game, the idea that every game creates a world for the player to be involved in. So what's unique about Second Life? What are the visuals and places in Second Life that inspire filmmakers to create films in them? And how is Second Life filmmaking different from Half-Life 2 filmmaking or Grand Theft Auto filmmaking? And what are the benefits of shooting in Second Life, creating a movie in Second Life, as opposed to creating a movie in Minecraft? And those are some of the questions that we're going to be asking as we go through our film choices, all of which will be Second Life Machinima in our film section coming up next. And I hope you will join us in the Thursday after this one. We're pre-recording this, so this will be in March. The Thursday after, to see what films we come up with. Phil will join us. He's come up with some interesting films, and I'm really excited to talk about the films that Tracy and Damien have come up with, and to talk about filmmaking and machinima in Second Life in general. So that's our show today for you. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed sharing the news with my pals here. We're basically a podcast, so you'll get the audio version of this at Transistor. But you can go to, that's our provider, but you can go to completelymachinima.com to see all of the episodes, all the way back to number 1. You can also subscribe through any major service, Apple, Google, all the others. And you can send us an email at talk@completelymachinima.com. We'd love to hear your comments about Second Life, especially people who create films in Second Life, your ideas on some of the news that we have today. And with that, the last thing is make sure we're doing the video version of our podcast, and that's on our Completely Machinima YouTube channel. And we're trying something different this week. We're using Zoom as a way of recording our video, so we'll see how that turns out. But thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And hey guys, thanks for sharing your news with me.
Welcome. Thank you.
See you next time.
All right. We'll see you. Bye-bye.